Hey everyone, it's Aesah, and welcome to my video on Wound or Anti-Heal, Shred, Sunder, and Set 13. Shred is magic penetration, Sunder is armor penetration. Before these keywords were introduced, a lot of people just call Wound Anti-Heal because it reduces your opponent's healing. Shred is magic penetration, but a lot of people use this term for armor penetration as well. So you may hear other players say things like Last Whisper gives armor shred. That's just the terminology the TFT community kind of got comfortable with before these keywords were introduced a couple sets ago. It's very, very, very important to have resistance reduction for your primary damage type as well as anti-heal. Basically starting around stage 5. Earlier in the game, it can be more efficient to use your items on other things, but later in the game, it will always be the most efficient to have one of these as one of your items if you don't already have it. This is a list of all the ways you can possibly get it. Again, you will most frequently access these utility keywords through your items, but you can also get them through units or some augments. Let's go ahead and look at this in game. So basically up here we have the anti-heal items and units. Down here we have magic penetration or shred. Over here we have sunder or armor penetration. In the top right we have things that give flat resistance reduction. That synergizes well with percent reduction and it does not replace it. So let's go ahead and look at anti-heal first. Basically you will always want one of these three items by stage 5. Sunfire Cape is considered the strongest in the early game because it starts burning immediately. You're not fighting a lot of units, but later on in the game, Red Buff or Morello is considered stronger because you can spread the burn to more units at once. Sunfire is every 2 seconds, so when you're fighting against a team with 8 units, even if you can spread it perfectly, which you probably won't be able to because of the range, it would still take 16 seconds to burn everything, which is a really, really long time. So Morello or Red Buff to kind of put the anti-heal and the burn, which does some damage on their entire team as soon as possible, is preferred. So again, by stage 5, when you have all your components, you always want to have one of these three items. You can also get wounding from Powder or Rumble. However, these are both 120 mana units, and the wound only lasts for 5 seconds, so it's not a really reliable source. Even if you have Powder or Rumble on your board, you still want another source of anti-heal. Shred, same thing down here. There's only one unit that gives it, which is Malzahar, but he's 105 mana. They're only shred for 4 seconds. I guess technically they're shredded infinitely because of the nature of Malzahar. But basically because he's 105 mana, the shred is also only 20%. Whereas the items you will give 30% magic resist reduction. So even if you have a Malzahar, it's still not bad to have a Shiv or a Spark. Definitely, I would say it more goes the other way around, where if you don't have a Shiv or a Spark and you're in the late game, a lot of your magic is damage. You should strongly consider playing a Malzahar for that magic resist reduction. You pretty much only need it for your main source of damage. If your team is doing almost all magic damage, then of course you don't need Sunder. Basically, this increases your magic damage. Shiv and Spark, and Last Whisper and Even Shroud increase your physical damage. But of course, if you're not dealing that much physical damage, you don't need these. And vice versa. If your team is about half and half, ideally you would have all three, which it can be taxing on your items to build all of these. So that's why a lot of the top tier meta comps tend to focus on one damage type. For those of you guys who played set 12, for example, Fairy Callisto was almost all physical. Like Jinx Wukong was almost all physical. Mages is like almost all magic. So that way you only have to build one type of shred or resistance reduction item. If you're magic, you only need these. If you're physical, you only need these. Or one or the other. Same thing over here with Malzahar being a 20% shred. Urgot is also only 20% sunder. He's much less reliable as well. It only lasts for 6 seconds. He has 70 mana, and he has a short range 2-cost unit. So first of all, there's no guarantee this unit will even stay alive long enough, and there's also no guarantee that he'll be able to sunder the units that you want. So even if you have an Ergot on your board, building Last Whisper or even Shroud, if you're mostly physical damage, is still very valuable. Up here we have units that do flat resistance, which basically by flat I simply mean like a set amount, whereas Shred and Sunder are percentages based. These synergize well and do not replace percent Shred and Sunder. So basically, even if you have like a Corki on your board as your main carry, for example, who reduces your opponent's armor with every single attack, or in his ultimate, every single time he casts his ultimate, he'll reduce your opponent's armor. This actually makes Sunder a little bit more valuable, but for the most part, you can actually kind of ignore these flat effects because they don't really change the way you play the game. If you're mostly physical damage, you want Sunder either way. But yeah, just know it makes it slightly more valuable, but you could basically ignore it in terms of what you're itemizing for, since if you're a Corki main carry, you're going to build Sunder either way. Same thing with like Caitlyn reduces both, but you can kind of ignore it. It's just more of a bonus that's nice to have. These are pretty decent throughout the game, but it's very important late game. Basically, if you have a unit that does, let's just say, again, let's use Corki, that does physical damage, and you have an item build, like let's just throw 3 items on this guy, something like this, and you don't have Sunder anywhere in your team, replacing any one of these items with a Last Whisper is generally going to be stronger. This might not be true for every single unit in the game, but it's a pretty good rule of thumb. Same thing for anti-heal. If you don't have anti-heal or armor penetration, then just replacing any 2 of these items, doesn't really matter which one, with like a red buff and a Last Whisper is most likely going to do more damage. So again, definitely prioritize these items. I think this is a common mistake that I see when I'm reviewing people's match histories from lower ranks. If you look at like the top NA Challenger players, they will have both anti-heal as well as penetration for their main damage type in probably somewhere between 80 to 90% of their games. Obviously, sometimes you just don't get the right components to get it, but they're just really important and really efficient. So always make sure you prioritize having these items. That's going to wrap it up for this video. If you have any questions, let me know in the Discord, and thank you for watching.